You are listening to the Bail Post. Here we are for another episode of the Bail Post. And before we start, I kind of want to highlight that we're in the middle of a legislative session. We've done a podcast episode in the past month or so about the major bail bills that are pending before the Texas Legislature. Those bills have made it through the Senate. They're now at the House. We had a hearing in the last month in the House on those bills, and it was a lively hearing. There was a report from the ACLU, and I think there were some articles about a case involving a defendant who allegedly was lost in the criminal justice system for 18 years, and that was an example of why we do not need this bail reform, but we need some other type of bail reform. And I was looking at that case, and I took it apart, and I realized that we were talking about somebody with a substantial mental health issue who had been declared incompetent to stand trial, not incompetent of committing the crime, but incompetent to stand trial, which means the criminal justice system would then spend a period of time to try to rehabilitate him so that he could stand trial. And I think all of that got overlooked. And I think I was interviewed in the last couple of days by that same reporter. And I think we have some more stories coming out in the next week. And suddenly data, which has been released, I think, by the Houston Police Officers Union and I think Harris County Courtwatch.com, that data, which has been released, a couple of years now, has never been attacked. It's never been accused of being anything but accurate. But suddenly, now that that data is being used across the country, suddenly I'm getting questions about how that data could be incorrect. And I'm like, well, that's not even, it's not a one-off. There's other states using the same type of stuff, getting the same type of results. So it's just interesting that we're in the middle of a political legislative session. Things are becoming overly political, like they always do at the end of a session. But because of the mental health issue, it was kind of timely that we had scheduled to talk today to our guest, who's from MHMR of Tarrant County, Ramey Heddins. Ramey, Mr. Heddins, thank you so much for agreeing to come on our podcast and talk about mental health issues today.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Well, now, according to my notes, correct me if I'm wrong, you received your bachelor's degree in sociology from the Texas A&M University.
That's right.
And you have a minor in psychology. You're certified. You are a certified correctional health care professional through the National Commission on Correctional Health Care and a member of the Academy of Correctional Health Care Professionals. You have 32 years of experience in the mental health field, with 22 of those years supervising criminal justice programs.
That's correct.
Wow. Yes. What brought you into, hey, I want to focus on the criminal justice issues dealing with mental health?
Well, I started out in just mental health, working in a crisis unit and working with being a case manager and those kinds of things. And then I had an opportunity to apply for a position at the Tarrant County Jail running the mental health program in 1996. So the program there at Tarrant County Jail, we provide the mental health services. At the jail, we work in coordination with John Peter Smith, which is our public hospital entity. They provide the primary care, all the medical care. We work in conjunction with them. But I was interested in that. I grew up with a family who had a history of working with the prison system. And in fact, when I was a kid, we were at where the walls are in Huntsville. That's where I got my first haircut. Those kinds of things. So my dad was my grandfather was a farm supervisor at Cofield when it was being built. So just that was my background, just growing up, and so I always had an interest in it.
You know, I tell people, and now that I'm a father of girls or kids that are grown up, I tell people that by default we really become our parents unless we affirmatively choose not to. And growing up, the reason why that stuck with me is sometimes people who have issues with their parents abusing them turn into abusers. And that really has hit me. I think by default, we become our parents unless we affirmatively choose not to become them.
Many times you're very correct.
And
So,
I mean, I have a great example of that, but it's a very small example. My dad, it was very difficult for him to say I love you.
mhm,
And I don't remember him saying that ever to me until he got older in life.
mhm,
And so my daughters know that I will say that to them almost every time I see them. And that
mhm.
was my reaction to him. I wanted him to say he loved you, and I know he did, but it was very difficult. So I've made a concerted effort for it not to be difficult, to be common for my kids to hear me say I love them.
And I think you're right. I mean, people, your children, they catch more than what you say. They catch what you do, and
Hmm.
you're absolutely correct. So setting that pattern and showing that kind of stuff to them makes a big difference. And we grew up in I'm probably older than you, but we grew up in an era where that wasn't as common, especially with men. So
Well, I hate to even play the game of who's the oldest, but but how old are you?
I'm 63.
Oh, I hate you. I'm actually 1 year older than you. I'm 64. My daughter has been telling me for a year I'm Social Security eligible now.
Your hair is not as white as mine, though. So
Well, but it is turning very quickly. And so I still have hair, but as I tell my daughters, it's getting more natural highlights than it used to have. But yeah.
well, yeah. So
I've always had a baby face. When I graduated from law school and I was 29, I went to Vegas, which I don't even drink, so I don't know why I went to
yeah.
Vegas. But they tried to kick me off the gambling floor at 29 because they thought I was too young.
Oh my
So,
goodness.
so I've always had this problem. I don't have it as much, but yeah,
Hey, it was a curse then. It's a plus now.
it's
Hey,
never. I mean, when you're me, I mean, the first hearing I went to as an attorney, the judge said, Mr. Good, and I was 29 because I didn't graduate from law school till I was 29. And the
uh,
judge said, Mr. Good, when your dad gets here, we'll start.
oh my goodness.
So I've dealt with that my entire life. So tell me about my health, my resources of Tarrant County. I mean, I tried to look up this and I got some information, but I felt like you could tell me a lot more information about the history of MHMR Tarrant County.
We've been around, I think you said, since 1969. We are an entity of local government, and so we contract with the state to provide services in Tarrant County. So we're the local mental health authority. So we do some things outside of Tarrant County with other programs, but primarily it's in Tarrant County proper. And we
Hmm.
have programs that serve everybody from a child, children from 3 years from infancy all the way up through adults in a various different kinds of programs. We provide substance abuse treatment services, mental health services. We serve individuals with intellectual developmental disabilities, what we used to call back in the day mental retardation, which we don't call it that anymore,
Hmm.
but people will know it by that. We provide those services. We Just a whole variety of things within that, including specialties in criminal justice, which is what I've kind of grown up in at MHMR and leading that most of my time here. Now I'm over almost all of our programs. But criminal justice is all the criminal justice stuff is still under me, and that's a big part of what we do. So the nice thing is, we really, if there's a service available, if you're at any age group, we generally, if we can't provide that service, our job is to really direct individuals to where they can get that service in the community. So we see ourselves as a community partner to ensure that people's needs get met, whether it's by us or by somebody else.
Well, when I was looking at MHMR, it looks like y'all were almost like a child protective services group for adults. And maybe that's a terrible analogy, but that's what kind of what I was thinking of it. You provide services to adults.
Absolutely, and we need help. When we need help, we call adult protective services, right? If we get
Uh,
in a situation, right? But we do look to see, and we can't do everything. And
mhm.
the thing that people have to remember is the all of our services are voluntary.
Yeah.
Like now the court may have an order for someone to receive services, but they still have to make that choice if they want to follow through,
There's a
right?
great example of that from Bexar County where someone was arrested, this lady, and her bond was set at $300, but she had mental problems. And she went pretty much straight from arrest to the infirmary.
Mhm.
And she refused to see the judge. She refused to go to court. She refused to see an attorney. And she ended up dying. And so that was used for a while as a poster child for, why we need bail reform because she was in jail on a $300 bond. There was no question about whether she could afford it. Her mental disability prevented her from being able about the courts being able to do anything about it. She got in the infirmary and then refused everything. And so I think the point about voluntary is a really good point. And, I keep saying sometimes it's really hard in the mental health world. We're looking at a square peg that we're trying to put into a round hole sometimes.
And I think the key there is when we talk about diversion opportunities, one of our commissioners said one time, we want the people in jail that we're afraid of, not the people that just irritate us.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really, really looking at ways, and nothing should ever compromise public safety, right? We don't want people out of jail who are going to compromise public safety. But if it's primarily directly related to a mental health issue, it's not a violent issue, it's those kind of things. That's really a perfect example. I don't know that person's case, but if it was a nonviolent offense, a misdemeanor, really, what could we have done quickly to get that person out of jail and into some kind of program? The issue is sometimes for judges, it's, well, where are they going to go?
Yes.
If it's to a homeless shelter, I'm not sure that's a better option. And I think that's where we get into a real bind with.
This is what I've always heard. During Reagan, we had major defunding of mental health at one level. And then over time, we've had kind of other from the state defunding or reduced funding. And so that now sometimes our county jails are the largest mental health facility left in the state. And I think there's a reason for that. Mental health is very expensive, and you're spending a lot of money for a few beds sometimes.
It's cheaper to pay for jail in the short run.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you've always got that expense usually.
Yeah, the long run maybe not so much, but the short run it definitely seems cheaper. I think the thing is that when they deinstitutionalized in the past, trying to get people out of our hospital systems, there's two things that happen. We reduced the number of beds in our hospital system, or we didn't add any, and our population has grown. So there's really not room in the hospital or at least timely kinds of room in the hospital for people who need it. But the funds didn't always translate out into the community. So you didn't have funding for all the community services that you might need. And so a lot of times we have a lot of good services, but they may not have the capacity to handle the need, right? Yeah. So it may not be just that you need a service, you have it, but it doesn't have the capacity or the funding to affect.
Well, and so in your experience, so when we identify somebody that needs a mental health service, and we identify what they need, but there's no room for them, what happens to them? Are they usually just stuck in Neverland waiting, whether that's in jail or whatever?
Well, a lot of the issue is generally anybody that needs, at least for our county, other counties may have a wait list, or other areas may have a wait list for outpatient services. We don't. We're going to find a way to get you in the door.
Okay, good.
And get your needs addressed. The issue is if you need comprehensive wraparound services or more intensive services than just seeing a doctor and getting medication. But a lot of times people need that, but they need a lot more support that goes around that to be able to keep them in those services. They may be homeless. They don't have any family support. They need a caseworker who can see them multiple times a week to keep them engaged in services. They'll all that kind of stuff. They may need a place to stay. So it's not just getting a medication opportunity and in front of a prescriber who can prescribe medications. It's all those other services to help get them engaged. Because a lot of times, like I said, not everybody's willing, or they need a lot of support to stay engaged.
I have a personal story on this. I graduated from law school in '89. I've already said I was 29 when I graduated, and I didn't pass the bar till I think November, which you take the bar in July, you don't find out till November. But in October, so between those, one of my sisters had a car accident. She broke every bone in her face, and she had many, many surgeries, but she also got some brain damage. And over time, the brain damage got progressively worse. But she was abusing prescription drugs for 30 years. I mean, she would find anyone and everyone. She had means, so she had the ability to pay for all the pain drugs she wanted. And she was in and out of treatment. I mean, you talk about voluntary. And at the end of her life, when it got to the point where, a lot of the family had written her off. And, I came back in and we had her declared incompetent. and did a lot of other things, but she ended up living in an assisted living facility for years where they managed her medications, and
Hmm.
she didn't have the ability to abuse them, and she became like the cruise director of the assisted living facility because she was a lot younger than the rest of the people there, and she called them, hurting her little old ladies and little old men, and she became the cruise director. Probably her last 4 years was probably some of her best years.
That's a
Um,
great story.
but I mean, I look at all this and I'm going, you know, your best option sometimes is still family. I mean, you've got to have somebody that's motivated. And even if the family has, you've run off the family because of the situation, if
Right.
they can come back at the end when you really need somebody, that's still the best option, in my opinion.
No, absolutely. And that's the thing is a lot of times you have either people don't have a family at all or they
Hmm.
really burn their bridges with their family.
Yeah. Oh, and I
Um,
can see that. I mean,
right.
that happened in my family. Because of the there's nothing wrong with me. I mean, I'm not going to go to treatment, or they've been to treatment multiple times without success, and they're abusing their drugs again, and you know,
Well, and I think part of the issue is that families need to understand and others need to see you can't make there's only certain circumstances you can really force someone
mhm,
to actually take their medication or get medication. And so even if you're in a jail setting, you can't force medicate someone. The only time that can be done is if the person's incompetent to stand trial and a judge orders
mhm.
they're found, dangerous to self or others, or that it's in the state's best interest, then a judge can order that to happen. But it's in Tarrant County, in particular, really on misdemeanors, that's not done at all. Um, so the process is people have to be willing, even if they're incarcerated. So even if they're out of jail, and the judge says, "Hey, you got to take your prescribed medications," that they still have to make a choice.
One of the biggest criticisms we've had, kind of following along this line, when we're talking about mental health issues, is someone gets out of jail, they get off their medications, they start acting out, they go back to jail on a new charge, they get
Hmm.
back on their medications, they get straightened out, and they get functional, and then they
Hmm.
get released. And it just seems like a lot of times we have that cycle of the revolving door of on your drugs, off your drugs, on your drugs, and functional, non-functional. I mean, is that a big problem in the mental health world dealing with criminal justice?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's absolutely an issue because you do have individuals that once they start taking their medication, and this is true whether you get involved in the criminal justice system or not.
Hmm.
Maybe you're a person who has mental health issues but doesn't get involved in the criminal justice system. It could be that you're a revolving door in the hospital. But what you have is individuals who take their medications, and many times they'll once they start doing better, then they quit taking their medications because they think they don't need them anymore. It's like getting an antibiotic; they tell you to take the whole
Hmm.
series, but you say, I feel good in a couple of days, and people quit taking their medication. So you have that occur. And you have people who really their illness, the medication is managing their illness, but they come to a point where they decide they don't want to take that medication,
Hmm.
and then they start having the same symptoms, and you have that's a huge problem. What one of the things that we try to do with a lot of the programs that we have is you try to mitigate that. You'd like to say that we can fix it and they never go back into the criminal justice system, but sometimes the success is a person who goes that revolving door in the criminal justice system. You say, look, if you look at their history for the last so many years, they've been to jail 20 times, 25 times, every year they go to jail, or every 6 months they're going to jail. Can we mitigate that, and can we shorten that? So maybe we keep them out of jail for a year or two,
Hmm.
and hoping they don't go back. But if we can slow that process down by providing support services around them, and you think about it, if you're on the street, you're homeless, you don't have a place to live, it's tougher to maintain recovery and ensure
Sure.
you're taking your medications. Um, and so if you have no means of income, even if you have a mental health issue, not everybody gets medicated, not everybody gets a disability check or anything like that, even if you work on it with them. So those are things that I think make it the disease itself a lot of times depending on the person that lends to that cycle, but also the fact of lack of support.
Yeah.
Now you do have some families who have an individual, the family's done everything they can, and this person still goes through that cycle, right? They have all the
But
support.
it gets worse. It's just the natural aging process. I mean, we have a great grandmother that was, we moved her to Tyler, and she was, getting dementia.
Mhm.
And when she first came, when she would recognize that she was repeating herself. And so when she would recognize it, she would just get real quiet. But as it got worse, she no longer recognized it and she'd just repeat herself. And then
Mhm.
as it progressed, so I think part of, dementia, getting the aging process would make that whole managing medications even worse.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes,
And I
absolutely.
mean, I told somebody one time if we could figure out what the fix is for this, we'd be billionaires. So have you figured that out yet?
I wish I could,
Well, I
right?
mean, it sounds like it's the real issue is what you said. It's the management and coming up with better strategies to lengthen the time between episodes.
Well, and some of the things that work that I think improve the process, and we have. And listen, these services come a long way since I started working in the jail in 1996. Is that we had, number one, there's a lot more awareness of people's needs. We provide medication on a regular basis to people who come into jail. But then for people who are bonding out of jail or get out of jail and they're in some kind of court program or whatever, the thing that really makes a difference is wrapping services around that individual. What I mean by that is someone who the judge can be a huge piece to this as well. You've heard of the black robe effect, right? Where
Sure.
drug court, it's kind of the drug court model where you have a plan of care for an individual, you provide wraparound services and support. The judge brings that person back in on a regular basis to review how they're doing. Depending on what kind of court it is, they may ask for a UA or something like that on a regular basis. But the judge there's a plan. Your plan is that you're going to take your medication. You're going to follow through with your plan of care. You're going to follow up on your appointments. Those kinds of things. The judge is going to know where you're at. Those kinds of things, and those tend to work really well. We've had people who failed at those, but when they've come back, they're in a different place than they've succeeded. And I think
Yeah.
we see people who stay out of jail longer. We see people who end up in better situations. Maybe now they really can't work effectively, so we've gotten them benefits. We've gotten them into some housing, and those kinds of things. So those things do work.
Well, I think
Um,
what you mentioned about the black robe effect, the importance of that cannot be understated because, I mean, the way I describe it is the hammer of the criminal justice system is what gives them the incentive, because it's still voluntary, to get treatment. And it's that constant hammer. And we're what we've seen is in parts of the country where they've weakened their criminal justice system or they've or are so much more forgiving, the number one impact it's having is destroying drug courts because there's no incentive to go through it because there's no accountability.
Right. And I think the great thing is, and I've seen some judges here in Tarrant County do an excellent job, they balance that hammer with the
Mhm.
affirmation.
Oh yeah,
And it's been really interesting to see because people really appreciate the affirmation they
yeah.
get from the judge, and they absolutely don't want the hammer
I think
or
that's a great point. I mean, when I had little kids, I was like, we're gonna, when you're this idealistic parent with a pregnant wife, you're like, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to do this. And when you are the reality of a parent, you figure out what works and you ride that pony as long as it works. And when it quits working, you find the new pony to ride. And I think that there are people that the affirmation really works well on, and there are people that need a stronger hand. But you got to find for each individual what works best for them. And then I would, if I was a judge, I would be putting on a file. This is what works for this person, and I would be doing that as long as it would work, and then I would find something else.
Yeah, because I've seen situations where people, who come through the same court who may not be doing as well, but then others who've had a horrible background
Mhm.
end up really succeeding in that model
Yeah.
and actually, moving forward in their life in a very productive and positive way. And previous to that, it was a wreck. And it was because
Mhm.
of substance abuse on top of mental health issues, not complying with their
Sure.
plan of care. And then, but you can see that success. Um, and so those are the things that really make it worthwhile. If you ever get a chance to sit in on some of those specialty courts, you'll hear those testimonies where someone's doing really well and the things that have happened in their life that are very positive.
I think the great value of these specialty courts, and I think I was looking at the number of people that can be handled by them. I mean, they're expensive and the number of people is limited for them to do a really good job. So it's a program that's very worthwhile, but but we're seeing that the specialty courts are going down in use across the country, where, especially in our urban areas where they've tried these bad bail reform methods. And I just think that they would have never expected that the result would be to negatively impact these specialty courts in such a bad way. Because I think the value of what you do is great. I mean, we're talking about people who've never been successful in society being told you have value, you can still be successful. And they've never heard that, or they haven't heard it in a long time.
Right. No, and people need that. People need that affirmation. There is hope, right? I mean, just your life's been a wreck before, it doesn't mean you don't have hope moving forward.
Absolutely.
Let's face it, if we don't have hope that there's a better day, if the day's not so good, life's pretty meaningless, right? And I think, a lot of the folks in the criminal justice system have had less of that opportunity and that hope. Obviously, they have to make choices, not making excuses for their choices by any means, but anything we can do to get them back on the path. At the end of the day, society's better off if this individual makes better choices and does. And not only is society better off, their future generations are better off. And so I think being able to make a change in their life, not just with their mental health, with their medication, but their whole life as a whole.
Well, a lot of times I say, there, but for the grace of God go I. I mean, we all have bad periods of our lives where we get overwhelmed. I mean, I was a lawyer and I was working hard, but I had a grandfather commit suicide. And that had, a huge impact. I had to go to counseling over it. Right. But there's value in a counselor saying, you are a good person. You need to get through, you will get through this, but you are a good person and you should not get bogged down in this. We should all hear that. We should all hear someone say, you have value, you can still be productive, and you just need to change these couple of things or just work through it. That's one of the things I say about the bail industry. We don't get enough credit for getting family involvement. And, listening to what you said, we should never discount the value of family saying, I'm bonding you out of jail. I still think you have value and you can turn around.
Right. And I think the key is with someone who has a mental health issue, anything that family can do and they can encourage them, because you don't want that person to, what's the term? I'm going to say it wrong. When they forfeit their bond, they violate the conditions and all that. Nobody wants that, right? Nobody wants them to end up back in jail. But whatever help they need to get that started as soon as possible, if they're a person who has mental health issues, who's not compliant with their medication, or who needs to follow through, start seeking those services. Now, there's no silver bullet for everyone, but if someone has that issue or it needs to be addressed, if you can get them to do that, follow up with services. If you need help, you can call your local mental health authority and start working. Now, there may not be a spot for everyone, but you need to start, and they should be able to help guide you either for services for them or where you can get services.
Well, and this is so much bigger than just the criminal justice system, because the criminal justice system is not built to provide all these services. The criminal justice system is built to handle, to file criminal cases and get them resolved. Right. We're trying to overlay a way of handling mental health services and other specialty courts as well on top of the criminal justice system. But a lot of what we're talking about would go on outside the criminal justice system, and it would be like you've mentioned, attempts to delay them coming back or trying to prevent them from coming back into the criminal justice system.
Well, right. Just because you get on bond for something or you get a charge doesn't mean that you're going to be involved in a criminal justice related mental health program. You can be involved in our regular programs. Like, we've got sets of programs.
Whatever you're doing can resolve the criminal case, but then you're going to have other services that, if trying to fit them in and get them tuned in so that they don't come back to the system.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's just some of the specialty programs are more connected and connected with the criminal justice systems, but our regular mental health services aren't necessarily connected. They're just there to help the individual. Just like you go if you have diabetes or you have a heart condition, It's coming to help you with your mental health
Yeah,
condition.
I mean, we're talking about mental health today, and especially with the criminal justice system, but y'all provide a whole array of services outside of the criminal justice that we're not even really mentioning. But I mean, y'all are just, I mean, y'all are incredible.
Well, we're blessed in Tarrant County. I think we probably don't market the great things that happen here. We've got lots of good programs and services, and really that's a partnership, not just with funding that we get as an agency, but our stakeholders in the community and working with the county. We have great support from the county, and we have a great hospital district here as well. And so I think all of those entities working together gives
Yeah.
us a huge array of services that really some parts of Texas and some places don't have.
Is there a charge, like a severe charge like murder, capital murder, where they would not, even with issues of mental health, they would be less likely to be able to be eligible for mental health services from y'all?
So no, if a
Hmm.
person's out on bond or if a person's in jail,
Hmm.
it's really doesn't, really we don't, especially if you're in the community, that's not really part of our question unless
Okay.
unless you're being referred to one of our programs. Like they're it's really not an issue. It's if they're on a pretrial bond and they need mental health care, we're going to provide mental health care right for that individual. So regardless of what the charge is, because our job is really not the charge. If somehow the courts and everybody felt like it was safe for them to be in the community,
Yeah.
that's our decision one way or another. And that person needs mental health care, we're going to provide that mental health care.
Well,
If
and,
it's
and and what you're saying there is when a judge sets bail for them, the judge is saying they're safe to be in the community.
That's right. That's the judges making that discretion. That's not ours. But we're there to provide services if they're eligible based on whatever's
Was,
going on with them.
let me talk to you about some of these services that I've highlighted, but one of them is jail diversion.
Mhm.
What I mean, kind of explain how would you describe jail diversion?
So jail diversion has lots of categories, and I'll tell you how I describe it. And there's something called the sequential intercept map.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, that's over my head.
well, the SAMHSA, the Gain Center, kind of put that together. But what it's a great map of kind of what it looks like. Where can you divert people from the criminal justice system? And really, it starts before they even get arrested.
Hmm.
What you want to do is try to make an attempt to keep someone from getting into the criminal justice system. So that's having great certain mental health services in your community. The next step is if they're in a crisis, like in Tarrant County, we have a mobile crisis team that assists. They work with police, but then we have a program called the Mental Health Law Liaison Program. And so what they do is we have a 24-hour, 7-day a week hotline for police officers to call. And if the criteria is right, we can share enough information to give that officer some guidance on what to do with that individual. And then we have teams in the community, and some of those teams ride out with the police departments when they are doing follow-ups or welfare checks, mental health follow-ups on individuals. So what it is, it's a situation where you're trying to divert that person, not when the officer makes that interaction, that if community safety is not an issue, that we either get them funneled into some follow-up community services, or maybe they need to be in the hospital and not in jail,
Hmm.
right? You have to be a danger to self or others pretty much in Texas to be able to get committed against your will in a hospital. So if they meet that criteria and it's primarily driven by their mental health issue, then the hospital might be the better place for you to go instead of jail. So that's one point where diversion can take place before they're even arrested. Okay. So the next spot when I think of jail diversion is if a person comes to our county jail, they're arrested, and they come to our county jail. What we have in Tarrant County is we have an opportunity to. I left out one spot. The officer, before arresting them, can take them to our mental health jail diversion center.
Hmm.
So instead of we have hospital as an option, if the person's willing, the officer can take them to our mental health jail diversion center. So that's a diversion from jail. If they do come to our jail proper, we have folks we call navigators.
Mm.
We have a team of folks who are addressing their mental health needs to get services while they're in jail. But then we have some folks that we call navigators, mental health navigators. What they do is identify, hey, this person has a misdemeanor. This person,
Well, it sounds like they're doing triage.
They're doing triage to determine, hey, would this person might be a candidate
Mm-hmm.
to convert out of the jail. We don't make those decisions. We just gather the information and
Sure.
work with the sheriff's department, work with the courts to say, maybe there's an opportunity for this person to be diverted, right?
Sure.
So we work on those things before they even really get very far down the system.
Well, I mean, it sounds like a lot of what at the beginning of the case we're doing, or y'all are doing, is you're evaluating if we can keep them from going into the criminal justice system or get them out of the criminal justice system as quickly as possible. And I think that's great work. I mean, that's doing yeoman's work, because that doesn't touch on all the other things going on in the criminal justice system, all the other backlogs in cases, jails overcrowded. This is just addressing the mental health crisis that we already have and how to keep it from becoming a bigger problem in the jail.
Right. If a person comes in with a mental health issue and they're probably going to become, based on what we see, they're probably going to be incompetent to stand trial,
Mm-hmm.
and it's for criminal trespass, and that's going to leave them in jail for a significant period of time.
What do we do though in that situation to prevent them from just going out and getting arrested again?
Yeah, and that's the question that gets asked, right? Okay, we let them, and sometimes they go, "Oh, well, at least we got them someplace for 6 months," right?
Well, yeah, that's what you talked about. So we had 6 months before they came back to the system, and there is value in that. We just need to lengthen it as much as possible.
I think that what is happening a lot of times in Tarrant County, if we have the opportunity, is sometimes we're diverting those individuals to our mental health diversion program, our unit, and there they can see a psychiatric prescriber, like a psychiatrist. That day, they can see a primary care physician. They can get their needs assessed. We can get them connected with the local hospital. If they need substance abuse treatment, we can arrange for a bed for our substance abuse program. If they need detox, we can get them to detox. So we can do a lot of those kind of things right there, which, if they're willing, again, it provides an opportunity to provide that support around that individual. Right. So that's before they even get too much involved with everything else. That's an opportunity.
What's the number one thing that gives them an incentive to be willing to do these things?
Usually it's they've been through the system enough. They're finally ready to change.
Mm.
And, they're at a place where they've decided now's the time I want to make a change. And what we do is we have staff really try to motivate them to that.
Mm-hmm.
And try to lead them to a place where they're ready to make a change.
I mean, that's both great and sad. It's great when they make that decision, but it tells us that to have the biggest impact, they have to be willing.
That's true. That's true. But yes, that's the biggest issue. The second thing is, what do we do when they come in to engage them, to try to at least keep them long enough to help them make that decision?
Sure.
And what we've done is tried to make sure we have a person sometimes with lived experience. We call a peer who maybe has a mental health issue, may have been involved in the criminal justice system in the past, to help engage them when they come into the program, into the facility, to try to engage them and really engage them in I've been where you've been, and kind of give a story.
I've gotten through it. You can get through it.
Absolutely. So those are the things up front that can happen. And then again, the next steps along the way in that diversion process, if a person's already in the system and they get to the courts, we have the specialty courts that do the programs we talked about a minute ago.
Sure.
We even have one that here we call an enhanced mental health services docket, and that's for people with misdemeanors. And the judge may set the conditions of their release and go ahead and get them out of the system quicker with the person. And we wrap services around, as I was saying before, we wrap services around them. We have a doctor that specifically sees that group of people. We have a team that works with them, but because we know they have criminal justice issues, so we have a team that works with them. So that's the next spot where we have diversion.
I've had a guest on our podcast before that said a lot of these programs have a high failure rate, but that's just because of a lack of incentive. You've got to keep the incentive going so they will keep returning to the program, and eventually they will change their mind and be willing to change. Does that sound right to you?
No, it does sound right. And there are some programs, like you've got some of the court programs where, hey, if you go through the whole program, we're gonna dismiss your case.
Sure.
Right. That's an incentive. You have to be in a right place in your thinking to recognize that's an incentive and follow through with that. The other part of that is that really we're the incentive would be we're trying to help you and help you see there's a better quality of life for you. There's a better opportunity. There's a better way of living. And a lot of that's changing a person's thinking because they've been in this criminal mindset for so long. They've lived on the streets for so long. It's hard for them to see a better place. Even if they're sick and tired of being where they're at, it's hard for them to see. Part of our job is to get them the treatment and stuff and help that change that thinking. And so if that's the incentive that's out there, but that statement is right. They have to see, there has to be some incentive for a lot of folks.
Do you have any programs where y'all are reaching out to family to try to re-engage them with the person?
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes we don't know where the family is.
Sure.
They don't know where the family is. But if the family's there and the family's willing, we try to engage the family whenever and wherever possible
Yeah.
To get them help. I'll tell a story of years ago when I was running a homeless program. We had a guy who had schizophrenia really bad. He was barely even communicative. And we engaged him through one of our homeless programs. This took months of building some trust, finally got him to see a doctor, finally got him the medication kicked in, and he started being able to communicate better. And we found out he did have a family. And we contacted the family. When we contacted the family, said, we didn't know where he's been. It's been years.
Wow.
We didn't know where he was. And so they reconnected, had a big reunion. So the more we can get people reconnected with their family, the better off that individual is. Most of the
I
time.
think it's difficult after they burn the bridges have been burned from both sides. And I think, and with my sister, she ended up start telling people for a while she didn't have any family. And so I understand that, and it's difficult. But I do think that there's value in continuing to try to reconnect, because I think their best chance. I mean, if I had not reconnected with my sister, I think she would have been dead a lot
Right.
earlier, because
I
there
think
was nothing.
people need those connections, right? And
Yeah.
it's not always going to work, but I think it's imperative that we try and do our best to get that. And really, it's part of that person who has the mental health to take responsibility for the recovery.
One of these other programs that I've listed is competency restoration. Now, I
Right.
mean, it's been explained to me that you can be held incompetent um, for the crime, but you could also be incompetent to stand trial. And if you're incompetent to stand trial, then the court will spend time to see if your competency can be rehabilitated. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, that's so what we're talking about is someone comes to jail and the issue of competency is raised. So either the let's say our program says, hey, we're not sure this person's competent, or the attorney says, I don't think this person is competent. They can't assist me in their own defense as an attorney. So the
Sure.
person doesn't have either the factual knowledge or the rational knowledge to assist their attorney in their own defense. So what the process is they get evaluated and determined whether they're competent or incompetent. That's not like you would in the community be competent or incompetent, but it just means you're not able to assist your attorney in your own defense. So yes, if you're deemed incompetent in that case, then the court will order you into a hospital, or the court may order you into a jail-based competency program or an outpatient competency program, like I said, or send you to the hospital for competency restoration. So we generally don't have people with high violent felonies on outpatient competency restoration,
Sure.
right? Or people with real high profile issues in our jail-based competency. But wherever you get that, it's not just trying to get your medication going, get you on track with your mental health, but it's also teaching you about the court process. So you understand who the defense attorney is, who the DA is, what their roles are, what the judge's role, what the jury's role is, so that you can be a good assistant to your attorney in helping them defend you.
Well, and it seems like, that these issues, especially like if someone's accused of capital murder and after a year they're declared incompetent to stand trial, then we go through years where they're being treated inpatient. They come back and brought back to the jail because they think they're competent, and then they have a whole nother assessment and they decide they're not. I mean, that doesn't have anything to do with bail. That has everything to do with the process of seeing if they can be rehabilitated, or they can create
Yeah.
they can be, their competency can be restored to stand trial.
Well, so if it's a serious offense, yes, it could go on for a long time. right?
So it's not delay that's causing them to be held in jail. It's the mental health issue. That's the
Yeah,
problem.
mental health, you're absolutely right. The mental health is keeping them in jail. They're still incompetent to stand
Yeah.
trial even after that time period. So the court has to basically they have to be released. There's some disposition has to be made, right?
Yeah.
If it's a murder or some kind of capital offense, then it could last years. Now, years ago, there wasn't a limitation on that. You talked about a person who had been in the, how long was that person in the
18
system?
years.
Yeah, 18 years. Well, a long time ago, there wasn't this cap to say that you can't be held for competency issues any longer than the sentence might be.
Well,
So
he was
that,
charged with 2 crimes, though. In the end, he pled to 20 years, and he had already been in jail for 8. I mean, he'd been in the system
yeah,
for 18. But I mean, they dismissed his capital murder case. They dismissed it because he'd been in the system, or his case had been pending so long on his mental issues. They were saying the evidence was no longer available to go to trial.
right.
And so, I mean, I
But
don't know how you criticize the bail system in that situation at all.
that's not a bail issue, I don't think.
I don't think so either. But hey, I'm not the reporters.
Yeah, but that's the issue there is if you have mental health issues, you're liable to stay in jail longer than you would if you didn't.
Yes, and I think that's probably, and I think the reason for that is because the courts are not equipped to address mental health issues in a criminal justice setting like they are the regular run-of-the-mill criminal case.
Well, I think when competency comes up,
Hmm.
that's going to slow things down. So that everything comes to a halt until competency is restored.
Yes, and if you
Or
go through a cycle of competent, not competent, competent, not competent, that can go on for many years.
yeah, and there are some people who cannot regain competency, and the evaluators on those deal are supposed to say, I don't know that this person you know, could gain competency in the foreseeable future. That's supposed to be a recommendation or a comment they make in their report. Doesn't mean the judge won't go ahead and order them to competency program, but at some point, some people are not going to be able to regain competency. So,
One of the issues that I've heard or I've seen in the criminal justice world in these urban areas where they're, cutting back on so many of charging and all these things, and so their specialty courts are drying up, is this question about whether a claim of mental health is now the King's X. When you claim you have a mental health issue, automatically the criminal case gets dismissed. And what do y'all do at MHMR Tarrant County to keep that type of thing from happening? I know we don't have that in Tarrant County because we have a commitment to the specialty courts, but as you're triaging these situations, what checks and balances do y'all have to make sure we're not someone's not trying to take advantage of a mental health claim?
yeah, listen, just because you come in and you take medications, anxiety medications, et cetera, you could say you have a mental health issue, a behavioral health issue. That's one thing. You generally are individuals, are professionals who prescribe medications, whether it's a mid-level or a psychiatrist. They're pretty good at recognizing, and all of a sudden the term just left my brain, but people who are feigning mental illness uh, or trying to do it for secondary gain, they think it's going to help them in the system because when they describe their symptoms, when they're not consistent, they can start to read through it that maybe this isn't really a serious mental health issue. And really, at the end of the day, it's not going to help you claiming a mental health issue because not very many people get found not guilty by reason of insanity,
Well,
right?
that's a great point. You can have mental health issues and still be competent to stand trial.
And be totally right. I mean, just because you have anxiety or you have some, minor issues that we may give you medication for in the jail and you have a diagnosis doesn't mean you're not able to function or make rational decisions.
Going forward, what's the biggest challenges that MHMR Tarrant County faces in the next 10 years?
I think funding is a key.
Mhm.
Funding is an issue. And it's not only funding for the programs that we have, but being able to help individuals who need to be in recovery have a place to live and to be able to get on their feet. I think housing is a huge issue. So you may say, well, how does that apply to MHMR? Well, if you're trying to provide services to someone who's living on the street, it's very difficult. So I mentioned that a couple of times. But I think funding for us is a real issue. We need to have some secure funding because more and more people are in the criminal justice system who need assistance. When I started in 1996, the number of people we served is just minor. It's such a small percentage to what we serve now. And part of that's society's expectations. It's a better awareness we have. So the need's growing. So I think for us is really focused funding and funding that stays consistent, because if you got the same amount of money 5 years ago, it doesn't pay for as much as it does today, right? I mean,
we all have a foundation, an MHMR Foundation. It's a 501c3. It's one of your partners that helps raise money for y'all's organization. I mean, where can people find more information or go to make a contribution towards MHMR Tarrant County?
Go to our website and you can make a contribution to that. That is such a great part of what we do because it really fills in the gaps that maybe we don't have federal funding for, we don't have state funding, and think, well, gee, MHMR, you're big, but there are things we can't do with some of that money that we can do with this money that really meets the need, because we serve veterans as well.
Yeah.
So we serve everybody, and we want to make sure that there are great things that program does that state money, federal money doesn't do.
Just type in MHMR Tarrant County, but
if
I'll put a link in the description.
MHMR Tarrant County, it will help you find it.
Are there any improvements, changes, new things coming out in the near future for mental health that will be new and be considered a great improvement that we haven't tried before?
I think one of the things that we're doing is working toward. We have a shortage, really, of licensed professional counselors, people who are. There's a shortage of those kind of folks, and so really providing skills training and working with our staff who are basically like bachelor's level staff to increase their skills and ability to meet those needs. So those are some of the things that we're trying to expand. I think if one of the issues that long-acting injectables we're already using, but they're very expensive. So in other words, instead of having to take your pills every day, you take a shot once a month.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Those having funding for those things to come about and to provide that for a larger scope of individuals is going to be helpful. I think one of the things that we are doing, just in a nutshell, is that now when we're looking at an individual as a mental health need, whether they're an adult, but also what's going on with their family. Like, what are the needs of their family? Because they may have children that have mental health needs. If we're looking at a child who has mental health needs, do the parents need assistance? And really, it's securing that whole family, because really that's what's going to make a difference moving forward for any one individual. Is the whole family better off? And so, Laura Kinder, who's our over all of our programs that I answer directly to, really has put that into play. So it's really raised the awareness of all our staff. Instead of just looking at the person you're funded to serve, what's going on with the whole family, so we can make sure that we address those needs as well. And I think that's going to show a lot better outcomes moving forward.
So if you were going to talk to a judge who's in a county that it's not really seen a mental health person in the criminal justice system, what would be your number one or two words of advice to them?
So it's a judge who
So a person's coming before them and it's obvious they have mental health issues.
Yeah, I would say get your local mental health authority involved. Find out get them to help you understand what resources are available. Because again, some counties don't have as many resources, but what is available, how can we maximize those resources to help this individual? I think to get in a relationship with your local mental health authority is huge. Like, we're very tightly knit with our courts.
It sounds like to me y'all are tightly knit with the court, and the court is interfacing with y'all, and in some cases handing off the defendant to y'all to provide services and hopefully solve the issue or put off them coming back into the system again.
And I think to tell the judge, if you feel comfortable doing that with staff and you need to set the expectations really clear, because not all mental health staff are intuitively understanding what the court expects.
Yeah.
Right? The court expects some accountability. The court wants to know what's going on with that individual.
Wouldn't it be interesting if you could get 4 or 5 small counties to do an interlocal agreement where they could work together and then have, combined resources that they
Hmm.
could offer for all four counties, and then they could do training with Tarrant County on what y'all do. It looks like it's great, and then that would help out all four of those small counties together. And anything that can help two people is going to improve the system.
Absolutely. And I think we work with some of our rural counties, and sometimes we learn from them too. But they absolutely we learn from them as well. But we collaborate a lot. They come visit our programs,
Mm-hmm.
so we and see, because really it's about, it doesn't have to be the exact program, but what you do is
Yeah.
take those, most good ideas are stolen from others' good ideas and modified, right? So
Yes.
what we do is, when we do things we've learned from other places, and we've taken them and modified them to what's going to work in Tarrant County,
Sure.
and what do we think is going to be palatable in
Yeah,
Tarrant.
I grew up in Eastland County. What works in Tarrant County wouldn't work in Eastland County, but they may figure out a way to do it better for Eastland County.
But start someplace.
Yeah.
Start someplace.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, hey, this has been great. I mean, I think this is a great topic. And, I've heard sheriffs before lament over the, just craziness of mental health, and they just feel like they don't know what they're doing. And it's just a big rabbit hole or money pit
Hmm.
just for the medication alone. And I think this gave some ideas on how to maybe come up with other ways to handle these situations. And, I always say whatever is good for the criminal justice system is good for the bail industry. And this is an example. This didn't really have an impact on the bail industry by and large, but it has an impact on the criminal justice system in a huge negative way. And
Hmm.
so if we could find a solution for this, it's good for everybody.
Absolutely. I agree.
All right.
And
Well,
it's,
thank you very much.
no, thank you for inviting me, and you have a good day.
Thank you for listening, and come back for the next episode of The Bell Post.